Wealth, and Maggie Sprenger, General Partner, Audere Capital, United States. Please join me in welcoming the panel. So Shombi, you have only two priorities here. Don't get caught in the crossfire, and make sure that everyone speaks into the mic with the mic close to their faces, because there's a live audience watching this, and audio sometimes can be challenging. You have 45 minutes. We have to leave the minister by 5:50. That's my promise to her. So 45 minutes to make this discussion. Shombi, over to you.
Acha. Thank you very much, Samir. To everybody here, namaste, good evening. I'd like to thank the good friends at the ORF, Government of India, all partners for bringing us together. Is session mein aap sabka swagat hai. Welcome to all of you. On behalf of the UN in India and Secretary General of the United Nations, it's a real honor and pleasure to be here today for what I would say I would argue is the most important session of these 3 days of amazing Raisina dialogue. So, her road from India, from boardrooms to global institutions, looking at the transformational change that we need in women's leadership access across domains, across geographies, government, international institutions, business, across the board. And just to say that the Secretary General of the UN, Antonio Guterres, repeatedly says that the lack of gender equality is the unfinished business of our time. And as we're halfway to 2030, we see that still, at present trends, we'll need another 100 to 300 years to achieve gender equality. So that's why this is such an important panel and discussion. And I'm so honored to join this really, really brilliant group of leaders. Leaders first, also women as well. And let me, if I may, Minister Irani, turn to you first. Under the leadership of the Prime Minister and your efforts to break stereotypes, to lead major government missions under your ministry, investing in women's empowerment, investing in adolescent girls, and in articulating, India is articulating a paradigm shift towards women-led development. There's legislative representation at local levels and parliament coming. And we've seen at the international stage, India's presidency of the G20, for example, this shining through. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, just last month at the World Economic Forum, you announced a new Alliance for Global Good, Gender Equity and Equality. So I wonder, Minister, if you could please share with us why and how has women-led development become such a priority for India's policy making domestically and on the international stage?
I think, Shambi, what is important is to reflect on the journey thus far. For too long, the agenda of women was differentiated upon and limited to a silo of policymakers, as though only a specific department, a specific desk is to look at the ease of living for women, the opportunities for women, the ambitions of women. The narrative was so distinct that women, very coyly so, allowed the use of the word aspiration and not the word ambition, so that no one feels threatened. I also feel that what has helped the cause of women, and I use that word judiciously, is the fact that we have a man at the helm now who not only talks about equality, but delivers it. In 2014, when Prime Minister Modi came to office, what was the legacy that he had inherited from a female point of view? 110 million families and women in them did not have an individual household toilets. Girls were dropping out because they did not have access to menstrual hygiene products or did not have a separate toilet in their school. 10 years ago, issues like cancer of the breast were not openly discussed because somebody presumed that it is not to be culturally, as a part of conversations in everyday family life or administrative life, meant to be propagated or meant to find a solution which was holistic in nature and was not in any way not responding to the diversity of our demography. What Prime Minister Modi inherited is a 4-decade-old lag in issues of nutrition for women and children. What Prime Minister Modi inherited was a legacy where women particularly and their security did not have an emergency response service in India. Now, in the past decade, he has delivered on all those fronts. For the first time in every police station in our country, there is a women's help desk. In every district of my country, there is an anti-human trafficking unit. In every district of our country, we have a one-stop service center where we ensure that women get help from medical personnel, from police, from lawyers. Free aid is given, a short stay home is made, working women hostels are made, homes for destitute women are made. 35 million pregnant women got a cash transfer into their bank accounts so that they could get vaccinated and they could have an institutional engagement for delivery of the child. We created a platform which serviced 1.4 million nutrition centers through 2.2 million workers and helping 100 million beneficiaries, of which 75 million are children below the age of 6, 25 million are lactating mothers, and every month in our country, those 75 million children get measured as per World Health Organization standards. We run the largest nutrition program in the world. What Prime Minister Modi also runs is the largest health program in the world. We all know with our experience, especially in gender, that when there is a capital crunch in a community or there's a capital crunch in a family, the woman's health becomes a non-starter issue. Women tend to either not medicate or self-medicate because they have constrained resources. Prime Minister Modi has created Ayushman Bharat, which now services 100 million families, in which there are close to 500 million citizens, 27,000 hospitals across the country, 1,900 diseases. And what is the outcome? 2014, before that, cancer of the breast, in terms of even testing for it, let alone treating it, was not a public agenda of conversation. In the past just 5 years, we have seen that over 200 million women have had themselves screened, have had footfalls in wellness centers across the country, which means Prime Minister Modi has, in his efforts, prioritized women's health. I had the privilege of serving as Minister of Education under his leadership. Our national education policy was not revised for the past 3 decades. And now that we have a new education policy for the first time in independent India, we have a gender inclusion fund which funds infrastructure for women. What is the impact? We have 263 million kids in our K-12 systems. But Prime Minister Modi also ensured that movement of credit, especially for women who want to pursue higher education, is facilitated, because most women, either in their journey of academics, were moving from one state or one city to another, or when they got married, were moving from one city to another. Because he made the credit system movable across the country, the number of women doing PhD in India has gone up by 99%. Now, I'm not even counting the fact that 43% of the STEM graduates in India are now women. I'm not even counting the fact that most of the frontline agenda work of ISRO, our space program, is led by women. I'm not saying that it is enough that I celebrate that for the first time defense schools have females enrolled into it. But what I'm extremely proud of is also that the Permanent Commission for Women in the Indian Armed Forces was given by Prime Minister Modi. Now, while those are big ticket items, Shambi, I think the details to which he has gone. India never had a menstrual hygiene program to look at menstrual hygiene waste. Prime Minister Modi even applied himself to that problem, so that aspects of menstrual hygiene are also looked into at the detail, at the ground, at the grassroots by administration. And yes, he becomes the first Prime Minister who, from the ramparts of the Red Fort, spoke about the availability of a sanitary pad at 1 rupee. Now, for a man in office to change that narrative, but also implement that policy, our appeal as his cabinet colleagues was, can we internationalize his efforts? And that is when India received the presidency of the G20, I'm extremely elated that he brought the women's agenda to the main table. We all know before that, civil society used to discuss the female agenda in W20. It never found a voice at the main table. He has now institutionalized that voice in G20. And I think that's India's message to the world, that if you're thinking of a future, you can't think of it without women and girls having an equal seat at that global table.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Minister Irani. So I think just carrying to the right here now, if I may, Ms. Rayner, your road to the top has been an inspiring one. I mean, you have quite an inspiring life journey, beginning as a former care worker, working your way to the senior leadership positions and in political positions. You've been outspoken on tackling the gender pay gap and strengthening workplace protections for new parents. So if I could ask you, why is it so important that we have policies to close the pay gap? How can we get to where we need to be in terms of equal pay for equal work, and as well as, for example, care work, accurately reflecting and remunerating and fairly distributing that care work, as we see care work will only continue to grow in the future workforce. Please, Ms. Rayner.
Okay, thank you. And it's a pleasure to share a seat on this panel with the fellow panelists. And it's inspiring to see what the Minister has achieved and what their government is achieving. And I hope to one day be able to repay what others have done for me, because the truth is, without everyone in this room are allies because you chose to come to this event. So that's important. But it's also important that what you do outside of this room to bring the people who didn't choose to come to this event into the conversation, because to me it's not just about the journey and what that does in terms of an individual, giving them their full opportunity to reach their full potential, but it's very damaging to your economy if you don't fulfill women's full potential. It is an economic argument as much as a social argument in terms of what we're able to achieve. And everything that people do, whether it's my mum who was born in a very poor area in Greater Manchester, who was illiterate, couldn't read or write and had serious mental health problems, her potential was never captured and she wasn't given those opportunities. But skip a generation to me, who was born in very similar circumstances to my mum, and then I had some great opportunities because the state and others invested in me and gave me chances. Now, I used to be very frustrated by the feminist movement. I didn't class myself as a feminist. I thought, well, what does that mean to me? And I didn't understand the academic argument for it. But in the years that I've been involved in policy making and pushing my way to the front, elbowing my way forward, I've realised that one of the crucial things you need to do is you need to legislate. You need to have the hard tools. And you also need the allies to make sure it's implemented and it happens. Now, we've done that in the UK. We've had legislation. We've now got 50% of parliamentarians are women through the Equalities Act, the legislation we brought forward. I battled in the workplace for equal pay. We delivered equal pay for women in the workplace, but we start to slip back. We've got laws in the UK that prohibit unequal treatment, that have employment rights for people, that are anti-discrimination, but far too often it happens, and it still happens, and enforcement of those rights, and that continual pressure to make sure that you get there. So I'm all for targets. I think you've got to keep them. I think it's a continuation. You can't think, okay, we've done that, tick that box, it's done, because it will slip backwards. And we've got to continually do that until we can change the culture. The UK, you know, my grandma, and the way it was for my grandma was very different to how it is for me. But we're on a journey, and we have to keep continuing to make sure we reach that potential. Because we've seen it in policy, we see it with members of parliament in the UK, that so often it's the women that raise issues that are considered women's issues. And it's so crucial that a professor once said to me, Angela, like recruits like. So if those people aren't in positions of power, then women won't see themselves as powerful, and they won't see themselves as CEOs of companies. They won't see themselves as doctors. They won't see themselves as prime ministers of a country if they can't see those people in those positions. So we've got to, first of all, make sure we have those hard targets, in my opinion, to make sure that happens. And we've also got to make sure that we have the allies. So my challenge to you, because I always think sitting in a room is interesting and we can have the chat, but my challenge to you is to, when you leave this room today and you've listened to the women on this panel, you need to do one thing of encouragement. What can you do in your sphere of influence to either speak to another delegate about what you've heard today, or what can you do back in your workplace or in your society, in your community, to make that change and to pat the girl on the shoulder and say, hey, you should do this because you're amazing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rayner, very, very powerful. And now if I may turn to you, Dr. Alakija. You are obviously very well known internationally, more recently in the area of access to public health and vaccines, the COVID pandemic and such. But you were sharing before that this title, Chaturanga, means a lot to you, and the title of this session means a lot to you. That from the age of 14, you were already engaged in organizing girls' clubs and bringing leadership opportunities to young girls. I wonder if you could share your personal journey and professional journey and how that links to the title of this session.
Thank you so much, Shambi, and I want to thank Samir and the ORF for having us all here today. When he reached out to me about this session, I said that literally I could possibly write a book, many of us could, on the title of the session, From Boardroom to Global Institution. But the shame of the matter is that there are too few of us who are in the boardroom and who are heading to global institutions. And as we're here today having this conversation, you know, really honored to be here with Minister Irani, Angela and the other friends, it is very notable that there are far fewer people in this room now than there were a few hours ago. It is very notable that this topic of conversation is really considered a sort of a fringe, a sort of frivolity for many people, and they're not actually engaged in it. We talk very much about inclusion, but what really is happening in the area of women and gender, and I also try to avoid sort of women-specific conversations because I talk about us all being human. I do the same when we start to talk about things to do with race, and I say we shouldn't segregate one another, but sometimes you have to come together as powerful women that we are, as wonderful, as beautiful, as great as we all are on this panel, and we have to tell the world the truth, and we have to tell it the way it is. For me, my journey from the age of 14 was starting a little club in Ibadan, Nigeria, called the Golden Z Club, which was for disadvantaged girls. I didn't even know what I was doing, but I just knew that life had to be better. It had to be better for everybody. I was relatively privileged. I also grew up, my grandmother was the one who was illiterate. My grandmother was a single mother. She had 3 husbands and a situation because she said, thank you, next, to the men who didn't understand that she was not about to be downtrodden and treated like a little woman in the village. She was a trader. She built the first house in her city, and she was fiery. And I guess there was a little bit of that in me, and I'm an only child of a man who was told that he should go and find another wife because this wife wouldn't give him sons, and he would say that this girl will be more than 10 men. And, you know, for me, that was what inspired a lot of confidence in me. And as I have grown through my career, I'm a medical doctor. He sent me off to boarding school in England. He used all of his money to buy my very expensive voice. Because he felt that it would put me at the top of wherever I needed to go in life, and it really has done, because it opens doors that are unbelievable. But even with those doors being open, because I'm a woman, you find that you walk into a door that very quickly you have to work twice as hard, you have to be twice as good, you have to be twice as everything to get half of where a man in your stead would get. You know, God give us the mediocrity of a man from the global north. It's a really, really wonderful privilege. We women have to work so incredibly hard to get half into the steps of where men will get to. So, getting from boardroom to global institution is about, you know, we talk about inclusion, but we have to remember that what it is that women have been excluded deliberately, systematically. We've been excluded by culture, by tradition, by fragile egos, and we continue to be excluded. There's a tokenistic representation that we see nowadays where, where we see nowadays when certain men are put into certain positions and they say, oh, let's have a woman. Let's have a woman, but let's relegate her to the back. So we put women in positions when it is time for failure, when an institution has gotten to its not about to make it point. And let's talk about the UN. Now we're talking, sorry, Shambi. Now we're talking about the UN. You know, the whole world is now saying it's time for a UN Secretary General that's a woman. Why have we not had in the past 70-something years a Secretary General that is a woman? It is not that we have not had women that are qualified. It is that the world does not consider that we as women, because God forbid that we get pregnant and have to have maternity leave. God forbid that we have a period and are emotional one day. I mean, can you imagine? We could start a war. I mean, which man hasn't done that? These are the issues around exclusion, and I want to go back to health, which you referred to at the very beginning. I have, in recent years, been the WHO the Special Envoy and the co-chair of the Access to COVID Tools Accelerator, and it blew my mind. It blew my mind at the beginning of COVID, sort of when vaccines were first emerging, that the world neglected to do clinical trials for pregnant women and lactating mothers. Do you know the millions of women that we lost? Why? It wasn't out of malice. It was out of we did not think about it. They did not think about it because the people in positions of authority, the men in charge of global health, the men in charge of pharma companies, they were men. So they didn't think that, oh my goodness, women are going to be pregnant through this pandemic, we need to trial this. Inclusion and going from that boardroom into a global institution, it's not just because it's nice to have, it's not just because we're fabulous and we look good, it's because it is necessary for humanity, it is necessary for the economic growth of a nation. Minister Irani just told us, the world talks all the time about the incredible job that India is doing in terms of development and growth, but those statistics she just gave you are the reason why. You know, and I think that in many ways we all do you a disservice, and perhaps you do yourselves a disservice by not quoting those statistics first, because it tells the bigger story. The focus on, and I would also say the Prime Minister Modi, perhaps, because, may her memory be blessed, obviously had a strong mother. He had a strong mother, and that woman in his life, as we all saw the honor and the duty that he gave towards her in those last hours of her life, that is why you now have somebody who focuses on women in your country. I will stop there for now, but my journey, look, it's been hard won and hard fought, and it continues to be hard. It continues to be hard because I say to all the young people and all the young fellows, we have Nigeria fellows here, we have the Raisina fellows, my message to all of the young ones, particularly the girls, I have a daughter that I call Princess President because I want to remind her that she's a princess and she's also a president in waiting. But my message to all of them is that I want my ceiling to become your floor, because we cannot keep on going like this. We will not get to the SDGs if we do not refocus on women. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alakija. And I'm just minded the male fragility bit. Probably many have seen that movie Barbie, and I'm reminded of this, I'm Just Ken, the song. How do we deal with that male fragility as part of the story? But turning now to Ms. Sprenger. I think it was Bob Hope once said that a bank finances a place they'll lend you money only if you can prove that you don't need it. But now you're engaged in a different kind of venture capital. You're into deep tech, national security, and venture capital. So a leader in quite a different sphere. Could you share with us perhaps how do the issues of gender equality or lack of equality affect your business and your role within that business and your colleagues?
Well, deep tech, national security, venture capital, I assumed we had solved it, so I'm not sure why I'm on this panel. No, it's a tremendous hurdle. I am frequently the only woman in the room, but it remains to me a mystery why we perceive women in policy, women in academia, women in business to be anathema to great outcomes, because we have the data to support it. We have data that shows that diverse perspectives in a room drive alpha. And I'll share a framework that we use internally at my firm, which is that we look at supervision and we look at anti-vision. Supervision is the ability to see what other people are not yet seeing. Anti-vision is the ability to see what is impossible, right? People didn't fly until we flew. People didn't go to the moon until we went to the moon. The things that these have in common is that they depend on different perspectives, different lived experiences, different day-to-day interactions, different problem sets that need to be solved. The person sitting in my seat, regardless of gender, is seeking alpha, right? Some sort of asymmetric advantage in either the financial setup of something or the moat that's going to be created by tackling a new market or bringing a new idea to bear fruit. I look for the people who are at the outlier, right? The bell curve, I don't want the middle. I'm looking for the people who have the supervision and the anti-vision. And that comes with that different experience, which is why I can't believe that we're still having this conversation, because the data shows over and over that women in the room lead to better outcomes. About 5% of venture firms in the US are led by women. 69% of venture firms in the top quartile have a female decision maker in the room. So when we talk about how to pursue better outcomes, and when we talk about how to capture better alpha, capture better ideas, capture better voices in the room, I can't believe we're still having this conversation, but we are. And women need to be included in a much more deliberate and thoughtful way.
Thank you so much. And I'm just reminded of the basic economic concept of marginal product. In any sort of model, you have different inputs, and if we consider gender as one of those factors, that if you have only men in a leadership panel or something like that, the value of each one individually is quite low. So getting, gender equality is also about just getting to a point where we have equal marginal product. But so far, as you're mentioning, the value of women is incredibly high because we lack that parity. And I would like to also just mention, I would just like to note that the Secretary General did mandate absolute parity among leadership in the UN system. So the resident coordinators, for example, and all senior leadership are at, in a way, perfect parity outside of the Secretary General himself. So thank you, Ms. Sprenger. Turning to Ms. Bhatti, if I could note that Bangladesh has made quite remarkable progress in gender equality in the last 20 years. Maternal mortality rates have dropped considerably. Women's labor force participation rates have gone up quite a lot, education, and more. Could you share some thoughts on that journey, how Bangladesh has achieved this, and what challenges still remain?
Thank you, Shambi. I was listening the ministers, and I found it like, oh my God, I'm sitting with them and talking about women's rights. It's already achieved. It's here. Let me actually give some context in Bangladesh. First, I'll take you to the Constitution of Bangladesh. The Constitution of Bangladesh forms the basis of women's rights. Article 19, Section 1 of the Constitution guarantees equal opportunities for all citizens. Article 28, Section 1 prohibits discriminatory behavior based on religion, race, caste, place of birth, and gender. Article 28, Section 4 stipulates making special provisions for women as less advantaged section of the society. To uphold the constitutional right, we need supportive policies from the government. So under the leadership of the government, Sheikh Hasina has greatly emphasized on women political, economic, and social empowerment in the Perspective Plan 2021-2041, 8 5-year plans 2020-2025, and the National Women Development Policy 2011. Furthermore, the government has implemented many action plans adroitly to achieve sustainable development goals relating to women empowerment and gender parity. The 8 5-year plan expects that men and women will get equal rights and opportunities, and women will be recognized as equal contributors to economic, social, and political development. Success in establishing women's advancement, participation of women has increased in the labor market. Their participation has greatly contributed to sustained economic growth, as you said. The recently published Workforce Census 2022 reveals the country's workforce is 7.3 crore, of which women are 2.59 crore. The number of primary school-going children has increased 1.70 crore, of whom 49.4% are girls. The introductions of stipends and school feeding program has increased enrollment in primary education. 1.30 crore students are being provided with stipends sent directly to their mother's account through MFI, which has paved the way of enhancing women's social dignity. The government has established one community clinic for every 6,000 people. So far, 14,878 community clinics have been established, and 80% of service seekers in these clinics are women and children, and 80% service givers are women as well. So Bangladesh has made commendable progress in women empowerment. Political Parties Registration Act 2020 stipulates that each party must ensure 33% of women's representation in all its committees. Unfortunately, this is far to achieve because there are lots of political parties, especially based on religion. They thought women leadership is haram or forbidden. So let's talk about some bottlenecks. Even today, in the modern developed world, parents still prefer having a boy over a girl. One long-standing reason boys have been seen as a greater blessing in that they are expected to become better economic providers during their parents' old age. However, it is time for parents to think that girls may be the better investment. According to the census, there are almost 50% of women and men in Bangladesh. Almost 100% girls are enrolled in primary schools, but 51% get married under the age of 18. Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics says the average age for marriage is 19. Then the girls disappear from education, training, and jobs. They are not on any list. They become silent workers of household chores and care work. There is no access and control over resources as they are not involved in income-generating activities. Inheritance law and practice do not let women get their fair share. So many women still need to be added to active participation in the economic sphere and at different stages. I can give you an example. The social perception of women as less capable in STEM fields, coupled with structural challenges such as safety concerns and harassment, forms a formidable barrier. Their issues prevail in urban and rural landscapes, affecting women's abilities to enter, remain in these crucial sectors. This disparity in tertiary education enrollment, particularly in STEM fields, highlights a significant gap that Bangladesh must address.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Bhatti. And now, I had really originally ambitions of a second round, but I think just so that we can at least have a couple of questions, maybe we can just take a couple of questions. I think we have the, someone is organizing up there. Perhaps we could just say take 3, and then I want to give each of the panelists, opportunity either to respond to one or just last comments. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much to the panel for your lovely contributions. My name is Danielle Alakija, founder and CEO of the Soli Group, and most importantly, daughter of Dr. Alakija. So I am the aforementioned Princess President. There's a long and storied history of women not receiving credit for their achievements and their contributions to society. So I don't actually have a question. I just want to say thank you to my mom. You can see the resemblance now, we're both crying. She has been such a light in my life for the last 27 years. Just to age her a little bit for you as well, that's how old I am. So I just want to say thank you in front of everybody here, everybody online, all of the young fellows who I did actually promise you to this evening, so you've got a lot of questions to answer later. And of course, thank you as well to the incredible panelists for everything you've done for women across the world.
Thank you, Daniela, and I guess that's a comment and inspiration to everybody's mothers as well. But second question?
Hello, I don't know how to ask question after this. I am Nare, I am from Armenia. Shombi, hello here. Armenia, yes, is here. And I just wanted to, my question is to Minister Irani. Firstly, I want to say that you have been the only person who remembered all the statistics without reading it. I don't think any man has done it here. Thank you for that. And I have a question to you specifically about, you mentioned like women's role in the education, defense, etc. I want to know if they are paid equally to men or more. I'm not going to ask too less. And also, I would like to know the rate of abortion. I think you did not mention it, when people find out the baby is a girl after doing a gender reveal. Thank you.
Good evening.
Yes, let's take, here, right, please.
My name is Ananya Tomar, and I am a student at Lady Shri Ram College for Women. And my question is open to all the panelists. So there are several barriers to women's participation in peace building. Women are often stereotyped as nurturing and naturally skilled at communication. So when can we expect these stereotypes to be overcome and for women's full potential in peace building to be recognized, allowing them to overcome barriers and contribute their diverse skills and perspectives to the process? Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Balali.
Okay. Last question, and then we'll have to come back to the panels.
I'm part of the Nigeria-India Bridge. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm a documentary filmmaker and a political commentator in Nigeria. And I have a question for the Minister for India. Nigeria and India shares very similar traits, and we know that when it comes to culture and tradition, that this often is a barrier for advocating and advancing women's rights. So I'm very curious to find out some tactics and what roles and what ways were you able to, address the fact that culture and tradition often plays a role in preventing from the rights for women, and if you could just share that with us. Thank you.
Right.
So if I'm to answer first, the lady who asked me a question about abortions, given that, and especially female infanticide, Prime Minister Modi started a program called Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, which particularly ensured that law enforcement agencies, along with our medical community, specially ensures that the fetus's sex is not identified so that this practice can be nipped at the bud. Whoever then still violates the law and is prosecuted and in fact after a judicial indictment jailed. 2 years ago the number was 600 in a country of 1.4 billion, but we are wanting to ensure that not one such child is killed in the womb. However, Prime Minister Modi was very conscientious enough to recognize that there have been women who've had medical challenges with regards to their pregnancies beyond a trimester which was allowed under the law, recognizing the changing medical landscape. In the 1960s, there was a conversation whether women at 24 weeks can be allowed medical termination of their pregnancies under law. Prime Minister Modi brought that bill to Parliament. In both houses of Parliament, it passed unanimously, and not a man in the country said a word. Insofar as the bridge between India and Africa and how can we culturally contextualize solutions, I think I'll take a leaf from Ayoade. The next UN General Secretary General should be, I'm not pointing at you, but Shambe, you may want to consider, if you want to reach your SDG goals, not only for women, but across all goals, the best, I think, antidote to that is to have a female Secretary General who will be just. In fact, if I look at it from the context of what we've discussed thus far, if it is an Indian, then you will be absolutely assured, because anytime you give an Indian a job, we get it done. If you look at Chaturanga and the concept on which Raisina Dialogues has been based, if there is a conflict, we are good at solving it. If there is a contest, we compete transparently. If there's a need to create cooperation, we are well positioned between the global north and the global south. We recognize the institutions and their functionalities of the north. We are culturally closer, of course, and civilizationally reflective of the south. And at the same time, in a world that is fragmented, we are the democratic glue that can keep it together. And when it comes to create, well, we are the ones who create opportunities not only for ourselves, but our friends globally. So like I said, a solution that the young ladies have been asking for is best found at the UN with a female Secretary General. Shambe?
Sahi hai.
I want to add to that you talk about Secretary General Guterres and his pledge for parity, but I think he could actually make history now that he's deep into his second term by stepping down like a true ally and having a woman step up. No, it would be a very powerful signal. I'm not at all joking, and I'm not being cheeky. I think it would send a very, very strong signal to the world, because this is what we need from the world right now. You know, you've heard all these incredible young people, and I've just finished crying from hearing my daughter, but you know, her words show us that there is still so far to go for women. There are too many of us that are working way too hard and fighting far too hard because we don't have enough of us in the room. You know, it was wonderful to have a sister whose hand I could hold and a male ally who ran up with me, or two of you with tissues right now, but those are rare moments. And it is, you know, really by working together and by deliberately, you know, the policies like we heard from Bangladesh, the policies deliberately putting women in positions, places like Rwanda where they've seen incredible movement. That is the only way that we can get the economic growth, that we can, as the minister said, truly cooperate and co-create together. We can't create just as men or as women. We have to co-create as a global community. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think extremely powerful, and I recognize we have just a couple of minutes left. I wanted just to perhaps if you would like to make any last comments, either responding to the question or closing thoughts. Masuda?
You know, UN Secretary General, maybe perhaps a president on the other side of Atlantic could be helpful as well. And let me contextualize this as Chaturanga on this subject. The conflict, we had enough conflicts. Ukraine, Gaza, everywhere there is conflict. Let's not bring gender conflict in our lives, in our country, within. A contest, fair contest, as Irani says, is welcome. And cooperate, that's what we need. That's what we need to go further. And create a just society, just world.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Maggie, would you like? Oh.
I'll just. Is this on? I'll just leave on. I loved your point earlier about COVID and the skew of data and the ways in which we've historically approached healthcare broadly, and certainly pharmaceuticals and medicine specifically, because it's been very skewed toward how a male would respond to the medication. And one of the great hopes that I have as we dig further into artificial intelligence and computational data sets, all of these open capabilities, is that we can amend this by scrubbing through millions and millions of data sets to finally have prescriptive medicine that's responsive to how the bodies look on this panel and in this room. And that's the tip of the iceberg for the capabilities and the ways in which we can address gender using technology.
I would just, and as far as this panel, how the body, it's looking like a wow, is kind of a very popular meme here in India. But thank you very much for that.
I've got a couple of seconds, so because we're finished, but thank you for being here. Don't forget your homework and be yourself and celebrate who you are. I get a lot of abuse for the way I speak, for talking about the lack of formal education I got. I'm proud of where I'm come from, and I'm paving a path for the next amazing women to come forward. So be yourself, be out there, and you guys in the room, make space and help. Thank you.
Great.